Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are.
Welcome, everyone. It is time for the Books That Make You show, and I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. Today, we're talking about books that make you fall under the spell of a gun-toting moonshiner in the backwoods of North Carolina during Prohibition. Let's travel back to the 1920s with a troubled young man named Rufus. He leaves his family and a secret behind him and finds what he hopes is a new home with the O'Haras. But things don't go as planned in this twisty, turning, historical literary fiction novel that's filled with loss, love, laughter, and a whole lot of moonshine. Lisa Engel is our guest today, and she is the author of Whiskey and Old Stogies. Now, she spent the 1990s writing feature articles and press releases. In the new millennium, her love of the outdoors drew her to volunteer for the Channel Islands Naturalist Corps. She's produced the documentary Ablitt House Journey and co-produced 30 Years of Literary Excellence, which is about the history of the Santa Barbara Writers Conference. She also serves on the board of directors, along with myself, for the Writers and Publishers Network. And through her company, 90 Degrees Media, she also helps writers to polish their stories. Lisa, hello. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. And you had me as a guest on your show. And I realized you sent an email a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh my God, I've always meant to invite Lisa on to the Books That Make You show. So I'm glad that here you are.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here because I'm a fan of the show.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so let's have you, Lisa, if you could, set the stage for Whiskey and Old Stogies. Tell us what's going on in your book.
Well, I actually, it's the character that got me. And I actually write better about things I don't know about than things I do know about. So I grew up in Southern California. And of course, in the 1980s and not the 1920s and not in North Carolina, but I always liked shows like the Waltons and Andy Griffith and of course on the Waltons they had the bootlegging sisters, and I always thought that would be fun to write about. So when I got into writing, I started writing about that kind of thing. And actually, the novel I'm working on right now is the first one that I started writing. And I had a scene in there where this character shows up. And I thought, well, maybe I can cut this scene out. But once this character started, I actually even thought, well, maybe I'll just call him the man and not even give him a name. But then I thought, well, maybe I'll give him a name. And once I gave him the name Rufus, he just started talking. And the things that he said, I just decided, well, maybe I should make him more a part of the story. But then I thought that this story needs more of a prequel. And then as I got more and more into writing, they said, well, you got to have the first book in the series. You're going to write a series, a family trilogy. You have to have the first book be first. So I got into writing this book first.
So your backstory became the story, and the story you were writing became your book 2, or maybe even your book 3. It's amazing how that happens when the characters start talking to us. So many authors say that, by the way, you're not crazy, or maybe all authors are crazy, but I hear that so often. Can you talk about Rufus's distinct voice a little bit?
Well, it's written in first person, and so like I said, I I like to write more about things I don't know than things I do know. So here I am writing from the first person point of view of a male character, but also somebody in the backwoods of North Carolina, uneducated. He doesn't know how to read. At least when we start the story, he's about 13. He knows how to do farming, but he doesn't know reading and maybe a little math. And of course they talk differently there. And so in the writing workshops that I went to, I wrote it in dialect. And some readers said, "Oh, I don't know if I can read a whole book in written like this." And I didn't think I could write a whole book written like that, but and it wasn't easy. But then people who were long time members of the writing workshop I attended, they said, the more they read of it, the more they were able to read and understand it more, and it became easier to read. And I've experienced that myself in reading, like, say, books like The Color Purple. I know when I first picked that up, and I don't want to equate myself to those kind of things, but still, it's kind of hard to read a dialect that I'm not used to. And but once you get into reading it, it becomes easier. And it was kind of that way with writing it too. And actually my editor, she said that the same thing, that it became easier for her to edit the dialect as she got more familiar with it.
Yeah. Well, and it creates this immersive, authentic storytelling. And when you hear, you've written in first person, so that person's words, it's almost like it becomes your own inner dialogue, which really can just bring a story to life. And like you said, once you get up and running, I remember even in college reading Shakespeare, heck, even reading Chaucer, at first I'm just like, what is this? I can barely decipher this. But to your point, once you get up and going, you start recognizing words, you start recognizing things. And I mean, we're smarter than we give ourselves credit for sometimes. We can pick it up. It can stick with us if we just give it a shot. I'm curious, how did you know how to write the dialect? Were you researching? Were you talking to people? How did you form its authenticity?
Yeah, well, mainly from reading and from reading those types of books. Even some of the one of the when he wants to make an exclamation, one of the ones I use is law, and I actually got that from Jan Curran back in the 90s, and just reading a lot of Southern fiction and Pat Conroy and a lot of I've always just really loved Southern fiction and movies and TV shows and stuff. So just picking up little pieces here and there. And of course, I got a book of slang terms from the Prohibition-era and, those kinds of things. The research was kind of fun.
Oh, I bet. So tell us about the research and looking up the Prohibition-era, because there's just so much to unpack there. What was that like?
Well, I still have a really big, thick book of newspaper. It's kind of an encyclopedia kind of thing, but it's got newspaper articles of all the different years. And that was one of the things I used. And in one writing workshop I was in, the gentleman said that his, I think like an uncle or great uncle, did research in Appalachia, and John C. Campbell, there's online, and there's even a Facebook group, John C. Campbell Institute of Southern Studies. And so he actually loaned me a book. I still have to return it to him, but he actually loaned me one of the books that his uncle or great uncle had written. And that was just fascinating, even though it was academic. And there really is, there still is people writing about moonshine and the history and all of that. So there is actually a lot out there. And, you know, Wikipedia can be good for some things, but, you know, like I said, I started writing this in the 90s and then the early 2000s. And I'm just amazed at all the things that can be found now.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. You're absolutely right. I'm curious too, are you a method writer? Were you smoking a stogie and drinking a glass of whiskey or a glass of moonshine? Have you imbibed at all?
Well, I'm not much for smoke. You know, my lungs just can't handle it. But I have been known to drink a glass of whiskey here and there, but not moonshine. I haven't. I've tried some pretty strong whiskey, but I actually have not tried anything that I guess would really be classified as moonshine. I don't know if I'm a little, at this point, I'm a little scared of that.
oh yeah, and I'm teasing you. I'd be terrified of that. That scares me.
Well, I'm sure, you know, it's funny. I went into a gourmet shop not long ago, and they had all of these barrels on their wall. They sell these craft whiskeys, and so that has really become a thing now. And so I think it is kind of interesting. You know, it's like anything. Some people like tasting wine, and some people like tasting whiskey.
Yeah, to each their own. And I do see every once in a while, I can't even think of the brands, but actual moonshine in stores. So yeah, how authentic that is, I'm not sure, but what a fun time to write about. Now, you call yourself a 21st century writer. Lisa, can you explain that?
Yeah, that you know, that is kind of one of my my things, because I do also teach writing and fiction writing, memoir writing, and these days, this is kind of my point of view. Is, you know, if you go back and you talk about Shakespeare and plays, and they started out with, they had to talk to the back of the theater, and or coliseums or whatever they had back then, and they had to project, they had to make broad movements, and then as film came along, that really changed things quite a bit, because they could show people closer. So, and you can see that in these early film era authors, you know, Hemingway and Fitzgerald. They really changed literature, and part of that has to do because they were writing for an audience that were watching movies, and so people got used to being able to see and hear the actors closer and actually see the face. And then now today in the 21st century, we're watching these big high definition 4K TVs and theaters and hearing all this sound. And it you know, you can see every detail on an actor's face and their emotion. It's changed acting as well, because you have to, as an actor, you have to be very much in character, and because your expressions, your audience is going to be able to see the details in your expressions, and that's affected writing as well. Whereas I prefer, as a reader, I prefer stories that we are in the character's head. We're not in like Dickens would write in Omniscient, and there's other books that are in Omniscient, and some authors can maybe pull that off. I know Lessons in Chemistry is the only novel that I really have read that's written in Omniscient that I was able to finish, because these days, with what I've been trained as a viewer and a reader, seeing these details and being in a character's point of view, and now they call it deep point of view, and you get that more of an immersive feeling.
Yeah, you feel like you're right there sitting on their shoulder, experiencing everything with them. You're absolutely right. And I never thought about how much it's changed from back in the day and from Shakespearean times to the present. You reminded me, I don't know if you've been watching The Bear on Hulu.
I haven't.
Oh, it's like every face is right there. You are in everyone's face. But you're right, the micro expressions, just a little bit of a fluttering eyelash speaks volumes. And in Shakespeare's time, that fluttering eyelash would have meant nothing. Nobody could have seen it from back in the far seats. I'm curious now. You were born legally blind. How, Lisa, has that been an impact to your writing?
Well, I have been listening to books. I love audiobooks. I really only read via audio. So, and that's been for over 40 years, really. I mean, I can read, and I've read many of print novels, but it takes me a long time. So today, especially with audiobooks so plentiful these days and so easy to get. I know growing up, they had the Library of Congress, National Library Services for the Blind. They would send out, you could get a free record player, and they would send these big containers of these records that you would listen to. And so that's how I initially started to read and listen to audiobooks back in the 70s with those, a big record replayer. And these days, they now have a way that, just a little iPod, and you can download it online and just boom, you can think of a book. If it's on their server, you can download it in just a couple of minutes.
I know exactly what you mean. I love audiobooks too. And they've really come such a long way. And nowadays too, some folks are putting sound effects, doing Foley. It's almost like an old time radio drama. It's really, really great how far it's come. And you help other writers with their stories too. You mentioned memoirs before. Can you talk a little bit about how you work with other writers to help them polish up their work?
Well, I mainly help with story development. I can do a little bit of copy editing. There's a lot of new writers. They don't know some of the basics, even like staying in point of view and taking out the author intrusion. That's one of the things. And sometimes people have a story, but they don't know how to frame it. They don't know. They've got the character in mind, but they don't have the characters really developed well. So I help with character development and story development, and a little bit of copy editing for memoir writers and fiction writers.
What bit of advice, sage advice, tips, what would you want to tell a new or aspiring writer? What should they do if they want to get started?
Well, one of the big things is they come with a story and the characters are all nice to each other and there's no conflict. And, if you're a big reader, you might say that you might not think that that happens, but it's true. There are people who haven't published, who have these stories, but there has to be some conflict in there. And a lot of new authors will not want to put will not want to put conflict in there. And I get it, because I am notorious for not wanting to hurt my characters, but I have to. And that's one of the things I have in Whiskey and Old Stogies, is I had to learn how to hurt my characters.
Yeah, it sounds so brutal, but all the best writers really torture their main characters. And honestly, we're all a little bit sadistic, because that's why we read books. We want to know how they figure out the problem, how they solve the crime, what they're going to do in this situation. Will they fall in love? We want to have those experiences right alongside our favorite characters. Can you tell us, Lisa, what is it that you want the reader to take away from your book?
Well, the theme is kind of, things are not always what they seem. And that's one of the things I tried to work in there, is you think that characters are one way or situations are one way, when they're not necessarily black or white, or, they are all sorts of shades of gray, whether you're talking about the character and their own personalities or the situations that they're in. You never know. Things are not always what they seem.
What did you discover while writing this book about yourself? Something that you discovered about yourself?
I don't know. That's kind of a hard question. Probably that I actually could write a book, and now I'm facing the same kind of thing where I'm wondering if I am going to be able to finish the next novel, because it's not easy to write a novel. And so that's one thing that I guess I hadn't really thought of it, but I think that's one thing I discovered about myself, is that I really could do it.
It's amazing what we can do when we have that drive, that creativity, the characters that come pounding on our door, talking to us in the middle of the night saying, hey, tell my story, tell it like this. That's what we're all here for. Can you tell people where they can go to find out more about you, find your books? I think that you have an email list too. You provide a free short story to folks, if I'm not mistaken, if they subscribe.
Yes, that is on whiskeyandOldStogies.com. Mm-hmm. And that I had a chance to get a free domain name, so I picked my book title for the domain name. And you could also just find me through lisaengel.com. And for authors who are looking for help with their stories, writing and selling their stories, 90degreesmedia.com.
Excellent. Lisa Engel, author of Whiskey and Old Stogies, a woman with many passions, creativity. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Books That Make You show. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for joining us as well. You can find out more about us on our website, and that is booksthatmakeyou.com. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and, of course, YouTube. We have a newsletter as well. Make sure you sign up for that and get news, information. There's always fun giveaways that you can enter. And that way as well, you will never miss a Books That Make You show with wonderful guests like Lisa. Until next time, all of my bookish buddies, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The host and executive producer of the Books That Make You show is Desiree Duffy. Sound mastering and engineering by Dave Napox. Social media and content promotion by Siddhi Jahagirdar. Copywriting and editing by Mike Robinson. The Books That Make You Show is an award-winning podcast produced by Black Chateau Enterprises.